Okay, so on Friday we started our introduction about what does it mean to see that function y equals x squared. Okay, so here's what we did Friday. We did x squared as a function, and it made this shape, which is called a parabola. And there is one point that is very important on the parabola, which is called the vertex. Okay, and then we talked about how to make this pattern to make that U-shaped parabola. Okay, then we said we can do different things to the parabola. We could put an a in front as a multiplier, and then it could be negative, making my parabola flip upside down. If I made a big number, bigger than 1, it made my parabola arms narrow inside. If I made a less than 1, it made my parabola arms go out more wider. If I put a number inside this bracket, it moved left or right, but opposite. And here, a number on its own makes it move up or down. Okay, so today we're going to learn standard form, which looks like this. So the vertex is going to be h and k. And when I grab this h value, because the formula has a subtract h, and I want h, I'm going to be using the opposite value. So if this says plus 5, I'm going to write minus 5. And because this formula has a negative k, I'm also going to write the opposite. Versus this is what we did on Friday. What do you see is the difference between Friday's and what I wrote today? What's the only thing that you see different from Friday's to this one? There's one thing that's different in my formula Friday and my formula today. K is over here and K is over there. Is that okay with algebra? What did I do? I just moved the number over here, moved the number. I can move the number where I want, right? So if you were to write the vertex here, HK, what's different now? This would still be opposite, because when you have a negative h in the formula and you want h, you have to work oppositely. And if this says plus k and I want k, then I would do the same instead of the opposite. Okay? So if a formula says subtract something, you got to be opposite. Okay, and the slope is that a value, that multiplier. We call it the multiplier. And what two things does that multiplier tell us? It tells us if we should open up or if we should open down. That's what it tells us. How do we know if my parabola should open up? If a is positive. And how do I know a parabola should open down? If a is a negative number. And what's the second thing it tells me? A is going to tell me how my arms look. It's going to tell me how my arms look. So my arms could go more skinny or narrow. or the arms of my parabola could be a little bit wider. So A will tell me all about that. So how do I know if it's going to make it more narrow? If A was some kind of bigger number, how do I know if it's wide? If A is some kind of small number, like a fraction or maybe a decimal, 0.3, something like that. And the vertex tells me what? Where I start from. So where are you going to start and be symmetric around? Okay, here we go. Question 1. Here's your equation. What's the vertex? So I'm looking at this position with the x and then this position with the number. So should I take this 3 as a 3 or an opposite 3? Opposite. So -3, comma, this value. So I'm thinking, should I be the same or the opposite of this value? Okay, I'm following this format. So what did I do? Opposite. So I should write +2. Opposite and opposite. What's the slope? So what's the multiplier? So how many x squareds would I have? Just 1. Because there's no multiplier in the front there, which means if you don't write anything, you're multiplying something by 1, not 0, right? Because if you multiply something by 0, it erases it all. Okay, we're going to graph. Ready? So I need you to go -3, comma 2. -3, comma 2. Okay, we're going to make a parabola pattern. Does anybody know how to maneuver a pattern on a parabola? Okay, if you change x by 1, y has to change by 1 squared, which is 1. If you change x by 2, what's the relationship of y changing? 4. And if you're going to change x by 3, y would have to change by 9, right? It's all based off of a squared function. Okay, and this is the basic pattern. And I'm going to keep my basic pattern because my slope is 1. Okay, so if your slope is 1, boom, just your basic 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. Okay, so here I go. Move 1, up 1, move 1, up 1. Okay, when you do this pattern, you have to reset. So you have to go back to the starting position. So my starting position is now back to my vertex. Okay, now I need you to head 2 over and then 4 up. So 1, 2 over, 4 up. Okay, you're doing this on both sides. So I went 2 to the right and did it, and then I went 2 to the left and also did it. Okay, and then we'll go one more here. We're going to go 3 over and 9 up. And sorry, yes, you're going to be a little bit off the chart, okay? Okay, so your shape is not pointy. It's a little bit curvy at the bottom, and then arrows, continuous arrows, right? Okay, these words, domain and range, you're going to see forever now. Okay, grade 11, grade 12. Domain. My question would be, what does domain mean? What's the left you go to the right you go? So what is this shape doing on the left side? How far left would I go? Well, this arrow is showing me go on, go on, go on, and go on. So I'm going to write negative infinity, comma, and then how far to the right would this move? Positive infinity. Okay, that is always going to be the domain of a graph. If I had a word problem, it might stop that, but range. This is what you're talking about. How far down does this go at the start to how far up does it go? Always in that order. Low to high. So what is the lowest height? Height. You got to think of heights, which are y values, right? Would we agree that it's going to be 2? And I'm going to put a square inclusive bracket on that because it's exactly. From 2 to highest, and that looks like it's going to go up, 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 up. Axis of symmetry. So I'm going to draw you what that would look like. If I could cut this in half, boom, I'm going to cut right there. Symmetry means you could fold over. How do you make vertical lines? X equals makes a vertical line. Y equals is just a flat line, but just X is vertical. And which X value are you going to cut right through? You're going to cut through -3. Okay, so where do you think that's going to always be? That's always going to be your vertex X value, right? Okay, and then a y-intercept. A y-intercept means what? Where your X is 0. If X was 0, where would you want to be? Okay, so if X was 0, I'm going to write my equation. If X, so that's what I did. I put 0 in instead of X. I actually put 0 in there. Okay, bed mass. Here we go. 0 plus 3 in brackets is 3. Now I'm going to exponent it. 3 squared is 9. How do I isolate y? Add 2. And my y-intercept is 11. So I'm going to go to my graph. What do we think about that? Where does my graph cross? 0, 11. Okay, so does that make that connection for you? It's always the worst on a test or an exam when somebody calculates it and graphs it and they don't match whatsoever. That should be a red flag that something went wrong. Okay, so if you had this graph and then you told me the y-intercept was -5, something's happening because that's not going to cross there, right? Okay, let's look at the next question. Okay, vertex. Okay, so this one comes first. The one that's with the X comes first. So should I write 4 or -4? Which opposite, same? So you should have picked opposite. Comma, the other value. So 1 or -1? Opposite. So you can actually place that So there's my vertex, 4, -1. And what is the slope going to be? What's the multiplier? If you FOILed this out, you would end up with how many x squareds? -2 multiplier. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my pattern. So 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. That's your basic. But we're not going to be basic anymore. Okay, so our slope is -2. What does it do? It multiplies. It's a multiplier in the equation. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to multiply my pattern. So this is going to now be -2, -8, -18. So the first day we learned if your A is negative, you're flipping. If A is bigger than 2, your arms are going to be narrowed. Okay, so here I go. 1 over, 2 down. One over, 2 down. Okay, what do you always have to do in the pattern? Reset. You got to get back to the startup line. Back to your vertex. Okay, give me 2 over and 8 down. Okay, so I see it got flipped, good, and it got narrow. It's skinnier than the other one. Okay, domain, -infinity to +infinity, left to right. Range, how low do you go here? Low is -infinity low, down, 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 to a top height of, what's the highest I'm going to get? -1 inclusive square. Axis of symmetry, x equals. And if I could cut this in half, I would go x equals what value everywhere on that cut line? What's the x value going through? 4. Okay, y-intercept. So mathematically, you need to understand what is a y-intercept. That's where your x value would be nothing, 0. Okay, and calculate. Okay, what's 0? Subtract 4. -4. What is -4 squared? Positive 16. So you could see my bed mass. I processed the bracket value and then I did the exponent value. Now I should multiply that. -32. And I still need to get that out of there, so I'm also going to -1. Okay, so checking out my graph, and this is my y-axis. Do you think it would cross way down there at -33? Does that look like the pattern would do something like that? Yeah. Wait, there's 2 more of these. Okay, vertex. What's the number inside the bracket? So -5, comma. What's the number that's not in a bracket? I don't even see anything. Is there any numbers that are just added or subtracted anywhere on their own? No. So then it is 0. What's the slope? So what's in front of the x squared part? What's multiplying? Right here, there's a little negative sign, so -1. We're going to answer these questions before we graph it. Okay, domain. The slope? No, slope is always just what you see is what you get. Your multiplier is your multiplier. You're thinking of my h and k, these things are either... So I looked at my bracket number, and I looked at my just number floating around. There wasn't one. And then A is the multiplier. Okay, range. So I didn't graph it. So what is my range? So my question is, does this thing open up like this, or is it flipped down like this? You have to look at your slope. Your slope says -1. So what shape does it make? It would be like that, flipping down. Okay, so if I look like this, my range is -infinity forever down to a top height of, what's the highest height y value that you'll get to? 0. Axis of symmetry, x equals. Which x value do you cut right through? And that's going to be the -5 value. Y-intercept, so what did I do? I made x 0, and then I'm going to bedmass it. 0 plus 5 is 5. 5 squared is 25. 25 times -1 after makes -25. Okay, so I wanted to practice without the graph to see if you could think of those things without your visual. Okay, so now let's put the visual here. So there's your vertex, -5, 0. Okay, I'm going to go to the pattern, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. This is basic. This would be if your slope was just 1. But we're not that. We had a slope of -1. A slope is a what? A slope is a multiplier. So I'm going to have to multiply my pattern by -1. So your arms shouldn't be narrower or wider. The only thing that happened transformationally was just that flip on the parabola. You've moved 5 to the left, and you've flipped this thing. You see it, what you did? You moved 5 to the left, and you've flipped it. Okay, last one. Okay, vertex. I need you to figure out what kind of number you have inside the bracket. So this is where my eyes are. Inside the bracket. So I'm going to go -1, comma, comma, some kind of floating number by itself, which would be that number. Okay, it's not connected to anything. It's not in the bracket. So is that going to be a 3 or a -3? Should I do a same or an opposite? When it's over there, I should do the same. So I gave you all this sheet. So here is just at the end, so now it's just same. What's the multiplier? Okay, so the slope multiplier is 3. Okay, domain. -infinity to +infinity. So you're going to go left and right. Range. So I do need to understand what my shape is. Is it up or is it flipped? Okay, my slope was 3. So what do I know about a slope of 3? A slope of 3 means it's up. So if it's upward, we're going to go, what's the lowest this shape is? What's the lowest y value height? -3. Is that what you picked? Okay, lowest height. Heights are y values. Comma. And then if this was going up, it would go up forever. Axis of symmetry. If I could cut that thing in half like that, vertical would be x equals. And where do I find the x value I go through? I'm going to cut it right through -1. And the last question of it says, what's the y-intercept? So there's me making x0. Bed mass. Brackets, 0 plus 1 is 1. Squared, 1 squared is 1. Multiply, 3 times 1. Subtract, and I actually got 0. Okay, so let's see if our graph matches what we thought. So -1, comma, -3. Okay, now we understand the pattern. 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. That should just flow right out of your brain now. Except I'm not going to do that pattern because I have a slope multiplier of 3. So you have to times by 3. New pattern. 3, 12, 27. Okay, so if I head over 1, up 3, remember you always reset, get back to the start, 2, 12. Transformations. If I thought about our first lesson, I need to move left 1 and down 3. So you can see my parabola shape has moved left and down. And then this 3 multiplier makes my arms skinnier or narrower. Does that make sense on the look? Okay, and guess what else is great? What's that y-intercept on my graph at? 0, 0. Why is that great news? It's because when I calculated it, it should have came out to 0. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to your homework, but there's one that might trick you. So just super quick, what's the vertex and the slope? Those are the big ideas always. What's the vertex? What's the slope? Okay, so when you do the vertex, it's always, what's the number in the bracket with the x? Are you probably thinking there isn't one? That is the answer. There isn't one. There's no number in the bracket with the x. So then it's just 0. Okay, I'm not going to write this for you. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be writing x subtract 0 squared. That's not going to be written in there. Okay, so that's why it's like that. Comma, where's the free number? The not connected multiplied number. Over here. So 7 or negative 7. Same or opposite? Opposite. And what's the slope multiplier? 3. Okay, so there'd be one like that. And is there a word on there that says min or max on your homework?
Yeah.
Okay, and then on your homework it says min or max. So here's all you need to know. When your parabola opens down, your vertex is considered a, would this be a min or a max? Your vertex is a max, because it's on the top, highest, versus if your parabola is opening up, this vertex is now going to be a min. Okay, so those words would be in your homework, and that's all it is. So you really just have to understand if A is positive, right? If A is positive, you open up, so now I'm a min. If A is negative, I have to flip down, so now I'm a max. Does that make sense? And if you want to do this with your hands, you can do this. Okay, it's just that visual.